With all due respect, I don't think these kinds of hypotheticals really reflect...
Don't tell me that.
Senator, first of all, if you don't ask a question if you don't want to know the answer. And I think but I'm saying to you, Senator, the majority of women who are getting abortions are already mothers, Senator. They respect their kids.
There are at least 5 abortion facilities that have no gestational limits on the abortions that they will do.
When the reporter asked how to transport the 13-year-old girl to Kansas for an abortion, the managing director said that this was, quote, not their first rodeo. They're going to know exactly how to handle that, close quote. The managing director went so far as to write a doctor's note to the child's school saying, quote, we can cut off our letterhead so it doesn't even say where the child's going, and offered to arrange transportation for the child, get the child to Kansas, and even pay for the abortion.
Let's suppose that a mother presents at 34 weeks and says, clearly past the point of viability for the child, and says, I have decided I don't want to have this baby. If I'm being honest, I don't want to have this baby. And it is going to cause me enormous emotional distress to have this child. I'm just not ready. And she's sincere. She's really thought about it and said, I'm just not prepared to have this child, and it will affect me emotionally. And I want an abortion. What are the ethical considerations presented by that situation as opposed to the ethical considerations, if any, presented by an abortion within the first 6 weeks of a pregnancy?
Well, I would say that the principal ethical question when you're talking about what it sounds like you're describing, legally speaking, would be termed an elective abortion, not an abortion necessary to preserve a woman's life or health. And that is principally, incidentally, that is principally what the social science evidence suggests. Late-term abortions are principally for situational, circumstantial reasons, not for instances of health and safety or even fetal abnormality, according to experts like Warren Hearn and other social science studies that have been undertaken. But the principal ethical question in any of these instances is, what is the moral, ontological, and legal status of the unborn child? What you're talking about is the proposal to take the life of an independent human being for the sake of the goods that you are describing, to preserve emotional well-being, to preserve a woman's mental peace or her socioeconomic peace. That's the ethical question. That's what's so, in some ways, impoverished about our public debate. We hear one side talking about one aspect of the issue, the goods of autonomy and healthcare and so on, and the other side talking about the ontological, biological, and moral status of the unborn child, but the talking is going past one another. No one is, as far as I can tell, engaging all of the different dimensions of the debate, which I think is essential for wise and humane self-governance. No matter what your position on abortion is, you should at least take seriously the other side's perspective. And that's what's missing, I think, from our public debate. And I'm not talking about my colleagues here on the dais, but our public debate would benefit from a more comprehensive conversation about what the competing goods are.
With my chair's permission, I'm going to see if anyone else wants to weigh on this. Let me present the situation again, because this is a tough case. A situation where 34th week, the mother says, I've decided I don't want to have this baby. And it will affect me emotionally. I just don't want the child. Should the mother, at that juncture, have the right, clearly a viable child, to abort the child? And who should make that decision? And how do you represent the child's interest at that point? Who represents the child's interest at that point? Now, that's a tough question. Would anybody else like to weigh into that, on that? Mr. Maddow? My eyes are terrible.
Mr. Maddow-Zimmet.
Mr. Maddow-Zimmet?
With all due respect, I don't think these kinds of hypotheticals really reflect...
Don't tell me that.
I don't think they reflect the reality of abortion care in this country.
You just dodged the question.
I don't think that there's a point...
This is actually get to answer the question.
That's what your side always says. Now, that's not my example's not unrealistic.
I think that
If your answer, I'm going to save my time, if your answer is going to be that never happens, let me go to Ms. Fry. What do you think?
Well, Senator, first of all, if you don't ask a question if you don't want to know the answer. And I think 1%, but I'm saying to you, Senator, 1% of abortions happen at 21 weeks or later. So I think the premise of your question sets up a conversation about abortion that is unfair. It is rarely is that ever the instance. The vast majority of pregnancies and abortions that are considered late in a pregnancy have to do with severe, devastating medical circumstances. And I understand your point, Senator. I understand your point. But with all due respect, I also think the chances of people sort of getting all the way through a pregnancy and just sort of saying, I don't want it, is disrespectful to women.
Well,
The majority of women who are getting
case,
abortions
then
are
why wouldn't
already
we-
mothers,
If that's
Senator.
the case,
They respect
I don't
their
wanna argue with
kids.
you. I'm really trying to have a discussion. But that is the alternative I presented is very realistic. I'm not saying it happens 1,000 times today, but that's where the rubber meets the road. And the answer I always get is, well, that never happens. Well, you don't know that, and I don't know that.
But I think the
And
difference,
I'm
what I would say,
saying-
Senator,
what I'm
is
saying
making a
is- let me
rule.
finish my thought. What I'm saying is, if it's not a problem, then why wouldn't we make everybody happy by saying, I'm not recommending this, I'm asking the question. Then why wouldn't we just say, okay, if you say it's not a problem, then what's the problem with saying after a certain number of weeks you can't have an abortion? Let me talk to Dr. Scott. You heard my example, okay?
We're
And-
now well into Senator Blumenthal's time.
Oh,
so
I'm sorry.
Wrap up at your time.
Can I get the doctor's answer? I didn't see Dick come in, I'm sorry.
Well, I would just say that we don't keep very close eye on what's going on in the abortion industry in this country. There are at least 5 abortion facilities that have no gestational limits on the abortions that they will do. So they will do an abortion on request. The woman that you described clearly needs mental health counseling. She clearly needs support. It is highly likely she is being coerced into that decision. The data that we have on late abortions,
But what
again,
if she's not? What if she is honestly?
You're really into Senator Blumenthal's time now. You can have the witness answer the question, but then
Okay.
it's not your time any longer.
What if she's not? What if she
I
hadn't been
just said
coerced?
it's
This
not
is
your
quite-
time any longer.
this-
Let her finish, and I'll recognize Senator Blumenthal.
This is quite a dangerous abortion for her, and that child is definitely capable of feeling pain as he is dismembered. So as a moral society, we should absolutely say, no, we're not going to let that opportunity for that late abortion to happen, and we should be willing to set some limits.
Senator Blumenthal is recognized.
Thank you, Doctor, very much.
Thank you.
This is not what the title of the hearing seems to suggest, which is that states are out there criminalizing interstate travel by a woman who wants to get an abortion in another state. Not one state is doing that. Not one state is considering legislation to do that. Now, don't just take my word for it on this, on what this is really about. That is the interstate transportation of minors, of children, without their parents' knowledge or consent, so that they can get an abortion. Planned Parenthood employees have themselves confirmed it. An adult male working undercover as an investigator with Project Veritas in Missouri told Planned Parenthood employees that he was seeking an abortion for a 13-year-old girl without her parents' knowledge or consent. According to court filings, after acknowledging that the abortion would be illegal in that circumstance in Missouri, the Planned Parenthood employees offered to help transport this 13-year-old girl to another Planned Parenthood in Kansas, assuring the man that the parents would not find out. They would never know. The managing director said, quote, "We never tell parents anything. She's an adult in our clinics," close quote. She's 13. When the reporter asked how to transport the 13-year-old girl to Kansas for an abortion, the managing director said that this was, quote, not their first rodeo. They're going to know exactly how to handle that, close quote. The managing director went so far as to write a doctor's note to the child's school saying, quote, "We can cut off our letterhead so it doesn't even say where the child's going," and offered to arrange transportation for the child, get the child to Kansas, and even pay for the abortion lodging, and other services so that the 13-year-old girl could undergo an abortion, a significant surgical medical procedure, one that in some circumstances can present complications that themselves can be life-threatening, all without her parents' knowledge or consent. This is appalling. Dr. Skup, do you believe it's ethical to conduct an elective, non-emergency surgical procedure of any kind on a minor, on a child, without notifying and, in fact, without notifying and obtaining the consent of the parents, and in fact actively concealing the fact from the parents that the procedure is happening?
No, it's a bedrock standard of medical care that we do not commit a procedure of any type upon a minor. They are not felt to be able to give informed consent by themselves, and we do need the parents' consent.
Okay. Now, how dangerous? So it's not just any adult that needs to consent. It needs to be the parent, unless parental rights have been terminated or something like that, right?
Yeah, if there's a legal guardian.
Right. Now, how dangerous is it to conceal a surgical procedure, perhaps an abortion, for example, from parents, the parents of a teenage girl who might experience complications from the abortion?
In this particular instance, every person, I believe, in this room would want to know if their child was in that sort of a circumstance and be able to come alongside their child to provide support. This child needs mental health care. We don't know who the abuser is. Is it someone in that family? Does this child need to be removed from that family? This needs to be reported to Child Protective Services, to law enforcement. As a civil society, we should want whoever impregnated that girl, which is by definition statutory rape, to be prosecuted. We should want to stop this from ever occurring. The abortion will not fix the girl. It will not restore her innocence. It will merely add trauma to trauma. And we know that mental health complications are quite frequent, particularly in this sort of a situation.
And particularly if her parents don't know what happened and she experiences complications, that could be a problem. Now, I was shocked to read the story that you linked in your testimony of an Idaho woman and her adult son were charged with kidnapping his 15-year-old girlfriend when they forced her to travel to Oregon for an abortion without her parents' permission. The son has also been charged with rape of a minor and producing sexually explicit material involving a minor. Are these the type of people who some at this hearing want to protect with their opposition to parental notification laws?
We hear so much discussion about this heartbreaking situation, and yet in the same, when we turn the page and see that there are those who are willing to facilitate the transport of these minors without their parents, we recognize that that's being used as a tool, that there's really very little care for that child in that tragic situation.
Mr. Chairman, I've got one small follow-up question, if I could ask one more.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you.
Of course.
Professor Sneed, tell me what the Supreme Court held in Troxell versus Granville regarding parental rights and how that might apply here to the transportation of a minor to another state without the parent's knowledge or consent for the child to undergo a major surgical procedure, one that in many circumstances can carry substantial risks for the child's health.
It seems clear that that's not permissible under the relevant precedent.
And why is it not permissible? What is it that we know about parental rights from Troxell?
Parental rights are sacrosanct and essential, and they're essential bedrock principle of the rights that citizens of the United States, people in the United States, enjoy.